My name is Marion Webster, and I am 63 years old. 2 years have passed since my husband, Thomas, died suddenly of a heart attack. In that time, I tried to rebuild a rhythm to my days. Mornings on the porch with coffee, afternoons tending the small vegetable garden, evenings with the silence of a house too big for one woman. Grief is not loud anymore, it lingers in quiet corners. That Friday, my son Jacob invited me for dinner at his home. He said it was nothing special, just a meal together. I baked an apple pie the way Thomas used to like it, and drove over with a strange knot in my stomach. When I arrived, Jacob greeted me warmly, though his eyes carried a weight I could not quite read. His wife, Natalie, was bustling in the kitchen, and their daughter Lily was upstairs finishing homework. The dining room was lit with candles, the good china set on a crisp tablecloth. My first smile faded when I saw it. 4 places, not 3. Knife and fork neatly aligned, a glass of red wine poured, and the chair at the far end waiting, as though someone was about to walk in. I froze in the doorway. Why is there a 4th place? I asked, my voice thinner than I intended. My husband's chair, his seat at the table, empty for 2 years, and now laid out as if he would join us tonight. Jacob swallowed hard, his hands clasped together. Mom, he said quietly, there's something we never told you. Natalie walked in carrying a small wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, polished smooth with a brass clasp. She set it on the table beside the untouched glass of wine. Her hands shook slightly as she pushed it toward me. Thomas left this for you, Jacob explained, but he told me not to give it to you until 2 years had passed. Tonight is that night. The weight of it felt heavier than the wood could possibly account for. My breath caught as I opened the clasp. Inside lay a stack of photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings, and an envelope with my name written in Thomas's familiar handwriting. My eyes blurred at the sight of it. I unfolded the letter carefully. His words were steady, almost businesslike, but threaded with urgency. Marion, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you deserve the truth. I am not the man you think I am. My past will reach for you one day. Burn this after reading. Trust no one completely. My hands trembled as I set the letter down. The photographs were of Thomas in his younger days, but not the man I had known. Tuxedos, yachts, black tie galas, and one clipping stopped me cold, a headline from the Boston Globe, decades old. Andrew Harrington heir to Harrington Textiles, vanishes without a trace. The face in the article was my husband, the man I had buried as Thomas Reed. I could barely hear the clinking of forks or Natalie's voice calling Lily to the table. The room tilted, as if the floor beneath me shifted with every word in that letter. My husband, my Thomas, was Andrew Harrington, heir to a fortune I had never heard of, and a fugitive from a life he had hidden for over 4 decades. Before I could process more, headlights swept across the dining room window. A sleek black sedan slowed outside Jacob's house, its engine idling too long, too deliberately. My instincts screamed louder than logic. Something in that letter was true and danger had finally arrived. Stay calm, I whispered to Jacob, sliding the box closed. Don't let them know I took it. His eyes widened, but he nodded. Natalie clutched Lily at the top of the stairs, fear spreading across her face. I slipped out the back door into the cold night air, clutching the box to my chest. My breath came in sharp clouds as I hurried across the yard to my car. Every step felt louder than it was, each crunch of gravel a drumbeat in my ears. The country roads home twisted through the trees, headlights bouncing across branches. I drove fast, checking my mirrors every few seconds, convinced I was being followed. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, the farmhouse porch light was still burning, a lone beacon. Inside, I spread the contents of the box across the kitchen table. Clippings of scandals, financial fraud, whispers of foul play. It was more than a secret, it was a time bomb. Then, tires crunched on my gravel drive. A shadow moved across the window, and before I could reach for the phone, glass shattered at the back of the house. The crash of breaking glass rang through the farmhouse, sharp and violent, echoing down the hallway. My heart slammed in my chest. I grabbed the box and ran for the narrow staircase that led to the attic. Every board creaked beneath my feet, each sound magnified in the silence that followed the shatter. Voices drifted up from below, male, deliberate, not local. One of them carried a sharp Boston accent that made my stomach turn. Search the back rooms. The old man wouldn't leave it unguarded. The words froze me in place. They knew about the box. They had come for it. In the attic, the air was thick with dust. I dropped to my knees and pushed the box deep into the crawl space behind the chimney where we used to hide Christmas presents from Jacob when he was little. I pulled an old quilt over the opening just as footsteps creaked on the first floor. I held my breath, every muscle trembling, straining to hear their movements. The front door groaned open again, a second set of footsteps joining. "Check the outbuildings," another voice ordered. Their calmness was worse than shouting. These were professionals. Moving quickly, I lifted the small attic window and swung my legs out, dropping onto the damp grass below. My knees buckled, but I forced myself to run across the field. Brambles tore at my coat as I cut through the deer path toward the neighbor's land. A faint light glowed ahead. Walt Green, his farmhouse, my oldest friend and neighbor. I stumbled up the porch steps, breathless. The door opened, and there he stood, shotgun in hand. "Inside, now," he said firmly. Walt Green didn't ask questions at first. He just shut the door behind me, slid the deadbolt, and set his shotgun by the wall. His farm smelled of wood smoke and coffee, and for a moment I let the familiarity steady me. Walt had been our neighbor for nearly 40 years, a Vietnam veteran with a sharp mind and a stubborn heart. "What's happened?" he asked, finally, eyes narrowing. I told him everything in a rush: the box, the letter, the men breaking in. His face hardened as if he had expected this day. He poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of me, and spoke quietly. "Thomas asked me years ago to keep an eye on you, Marion. Said if trouble ever came, it would come fast." The words shook me. My husband had prepared even for this. Walt opened a drawer, pulling out a battered walkie-talkie and his old service pistol. "I'll make some noise, call the sheriff, keep them busy out here. You take my truck, head into town, and disappear for a while." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. The number was unknown. Against my better judgment, I picked up. A woman's voice slid through the speaker, calm and cold. "Mrs. Webster, or should I say Miss Harrington? You have something that belongs to me. If you want your family to stay safe, you'll cooperate." The line went dead. My hands shook as I lowered the phone. For the first time in years, real fear gripped me, not for myself, but for Jacob, Natalie, and little Lily. I drove Walt's old pickup through the back roads, the engine rattling but steady. My hands clutched the wheels so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every pair of headlights in the distance felt like a threat, every turn in the road a possible trap. I didn't go to the sheriff's office. Something in Thomas's letter warned me against trusting too easily. Instead, my instincts pulled me toward the one place that had always felt safe: the town library. The library was dark, closed for the night, but I still had the old board member's key from years ago. Inside, the silence wrapped around me like a blanket. I sat at one of the wooden tables, spreading out the clippings again, trying to piece together who my husband had really been. That's when I heard footsteps. My breath caught, but before I could run, a man's voice spoke softly. "Mrs. Webster, don't be afraid." From the shadows stepped a tall man in his 40s, wearing a worn leather jacket. "My name is Marco Alvarez. I've been following this case for a long time. I'm not here to hurt you, I'm here to help." I didn't answer, but he pulled out a folder of his own and laid it on the table. "Your husband, Andrew Harrington, uncovered massive money laundering through Harrington Textiles. When he disappeared, they assumed he was dead, but he started over as Thomas Reed." His eyes searched mine. "Those people at your farm tonight, they're not amateurs. They don't want the truth buried, they want you gone." Trusting him felt dangerous, but not trusting him felt worse. Marco and I left the library just before dawn, the folder of evidence tucked beneath his arm. The night air was bitter, and every sound seemed magnified: the hum of the street lamp, the crunch of gravel under our shoes. When we pulled into my farm's long dirt lane, my heart sank. Lights glowed in the upstairs windows. Someone had already been inside. "The attic," I whispered. "That's where I hid the box." Marco cursed under his breath. They'd been through it. If they found it, they know you're moving against them. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the field from the opposite direction. A silver sedan rolled to a stop, and a woman stepped out, poised, composed, wearing a tailored coat. She looked more like she belonged in a courtroom than on a muddy farm road. "Mrs. Webster?" she called. "My name is Sloane Park. I was your husband's attorney. I believe we should talk." My chest tightened. Another stranger, another claim. But when she opened her briefcase and produced a sealed envelope with Thomas's handwriting, my knees nearly buckled. Inside was a message he had written years earlier. "If you are reading this, Marion, it means Sloane has reached you. She is to be trusted. Follow her plan." Sloane's voice was calm, deliberate. "That box in your attic, it was a decoy. Your husband left me the true dossier, the one that actually matters, and if you want to survive this, you'll need to see it." Marco and I exchanged a glance. For the first time, I felt like the pieces might finally connect. We followed Sloane to a small safe house on the edge of town, a plain brick building that looked more like a storage office than a sanctuary. Inside, she laid a thick leather-bound folder on the table. My pulse quickened as she undid the straps. "This," she said, "is what Thomas risked everything to protect." The dossier was meticulous: handwritten ledgers, bank records, scanned documents, all linked together in a careful chain. The more I read, the colder I felt. Harrington Textiles wasn't just a clothing empire, it had been used as a funnel, laundering millions through shell corporations, real estate, even defense contracts. Names appeared in neat columns: politicians, executives, board members, some I recognized from the evening news. But one set of initials made my stomach twist. CP. They appeared again and again beside large transfers. Sloane tapped the page. "Charlotte Pembroke. She was your husband's fiancée before he disappeared. She's the one who turned the family fortune into a machine for corruption. And she's the one who has been hunting you." I pressed a hand to my mouth. My Thomas had carried this weight for decades, hiding us from the storm. He had built a second life, not out of deception alone, but out of fear. Sloane leaned closer. "He left safeguards. Copies of these files are stored off-site. If anything happens to you, they will be released. But if you want to end this cleanly, we need to use these documents strategically." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a video. Jacob and Natalie, bound to chairs, fear in their eyes. And then the screen went black. My hands shook as I lowered the phone. The image of Jacob and Natalie tied to those chairs burned into my mind. "They have my family," I whispered, my throat dry. Marco steadied me with a hand on my shoulder. Sloane's face remained calm, almost unnervingly so. "This is what Thomas prepared for," she said. "We don't just hand over the files, we use them." The plan was simple on paper, terrifying in practice. First, Sloane duplicated every page of the dossier, encrypting digital copies and storing them in timed release accounts. If anything happened to us, reporters and federal investigators would receive the evidence automatically. "It's our dead man switch," she explained. "Insurance." Second, Marco wired me with a discreet microphone. My role was to face Charlotte directly, not to outfight her, but to push her into words she couldn't take back. "Documents matter," Marco said, "but a confession? That resonates with juries. It breaks the walls money usually builds." I practiced the lines over and over, my palms damp. I would ask why she turned on Thomas. I would demand to know what she had done with the fortune. I would press just enough to make her pride slip into arrogance, her arrogance into confession. Finally, we arranged the meet. Charlotte sent her terms in a message as cold as her voice. "Dawn, at the abandoned Harrington Mill outside Lancaster. Bring what he left you," she wrote. "Come alone. If I see police, your son and daughter-in-law won't walk out." I closed my eyes, forcing steady breaths. I had spent 2 years learning to live without my husband. Now I had to learn how to fight in his place. The Harrington Mill stood like a skeleton against the dawn sky, its rusted beams jutting upward, broken windows staring like empty eyes. The air was damp and cold, carrying the smell of oil and mildew. My boots echoed on the cracked concrete floor as I stepped inside, heart pounding. I kept my hands visible, the small folder clutched tightly against my chest. Jacob and Natalie were there, tied to chairs in the center of the cavernous room. Their eyes lit up with fear and relief when they saw me. 4 men in tailored suits stood guard, their silence more menacing than threats. And by the broken windows, dressed in a sharp gray coat, stood Charlotte Pembroke. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her poise untouched by the decay around her. She looked like she had stepped out of a boardroom, not a crime scene. "Marion Webster," she said smoothly, her voice echoing off the steel walls. "Or should I say, Miss Harrington? You've inherited more than your husband's name. You've inherited his mistakes." I forced myself to meet her gaze. "Mistakes? Or truths you couldn't bury?" She smiled faintly. "Andrew thought he could expose me, humiliate me, walk away with his clean conscience. He forgot that power doesn't forgive betrayal. He built a second life with you, yes, but every day of it was stolen from me. From us." Her words were a blade, but they also gave me what I needed. Slowly, I opened the folder and pulled out a single page. "You signed this transfer, Charlotte. July 15, 1982. $20 million into a Saman account. I wonder how the public will respond when they see your initials beside that. For the first time, her mask cracked. You wouldn't dare. I held up my phone, the drafted message to the media queued, attachments already linked. One press of my finger and the world will know. Unless, of course, you'd like to explain it yourself. Her jaw tightened, pride pushing her toward the edge. You don't understand what it took to keep the Harrington name untouchable. Deals had to be made. Fortunes redirected. Your husband was weak, he wanted justice. I wanted legacy. That was enough. I slipped my thumb across the small panic fob in my pocket. A piercing tone clicked in my earpiece. Suddenly, windows shattered from above as Marco's team descended on ropes, their dark figures cutting through the dust and light. Gunfire cracked, sparking against metal beams. One guard lunged for me, but Marco tackled him to the ground. Charlotte pulled a pistol from her purse, aiming straight at me. The shot rang out, deafening. My body flinched, but I wasn't hit. Marco's round had struck her arm, spinning the weapon out of her hand. Federal agents stormed through the side doors, shouting commands, securing the guards. Charlotte clutched her wound, her face twisted with fury. As Jacob and Natalie were cut free, Charlotte spat her last venom. You'll be the widow of a coward. And I'll be remembered as the one who built an empire. I stepped closer, voice steady despite my trembling. No, you'll be remembered for what you really were. And I'll be remembered as the woman who ended it. Her eyes burned into mine as agents hauled her away in cuffs. The sound of sirens filled the air. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. Snow blanketed the fields outside my farmhouse, turning the land into a quiet ocean of white. It had been 3 months since that morning in the Harrington mill. 3 months since Charlotte Pembroke had been dragged away in handcuffs, her empire collapsing piece by piece. The newspapers called it the biggest financial scandal of the decade. To me, it was simply the end of a nightmare. Jacob and Natalie had healed slowly, both in body and spirit. The bruises faded, but the fear lingered in their voices, in the way they glanced over their shoulders at night. Emma, blissfully unaware of the darkest parts of it all, still filled the rooms with her laughter. For that, I was endlessly grateful. The federal prosecutors called almost weekly, asking for more documents, more testimony. Each time, I answered. I owed Andrew that much. He had carried his secrets alone for too long. Now they belonged to the world. But life wasn't just courtrooms and headlines. Jacob had left his corporate job, choosing instead to return to the land, to work beside me. Natalie began teaching at the local school, her smile growing brighter with each passing week. And the farmhouse, once a place of silence and grief, was alive again. At night, I would sit by the fire, Andrew's letter tucked in my jewelry box upstairs. And though the questions would always linger, the answers had come too. He loved me. And in the end, that love had been the truest part of his life. By summer, the farm was alive again. The cornfield stretched high, Emma chased fireflies in the twilight, and Jacob's laughter carried across the yard as he worked the soil his father once tended. Life had returned to this place, not as it was before, but as something new, something built from truth instead of shadows. The foundation Andrew had dreamed of was now real, funded by the money once meant to silence him. It carried his name, not as a mask, but as a beacon. Families shattered by financial crimes found support. Whistleblowers who once stood alone found protection. His sacrifice, his lies, and his love had transformed into something greater than either of us could have imagined. Sometimes, when I walk the rows at dusk, I whisper into the air. I tell him about Emma's smile, Jacob's newfound purpose, or the steady peace that has begun to take root in my heart. And though the wind never answers, I feel less alone. Andrew Harrington had been 2 men, James Whitmore, heir to wealth and corruption, and Robert Caldwell, the farmer I loved. But in the end, what mattered most wasn't the names, the lies, or the past. What mattered was the choice he made, the choice to build a life with me. And now I choose to keep living, not as the woman broken by secrets, but as the woman who found her strength in the truth. So, that is my story. A story of secrets, betrayal, but also of strength and love. Sometimes the truth we fear the most is the very thing that sets us free. My name is Marian Webster, and I learned that even in the darkest chapters, we can choose to rebuild, to keep living, and to protect the ones we love. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you keep the secrets, or risk everything to uncover the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story touched you, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world.